It's my father. My God. I only saw him years later when he was worn down by life. Look at him. He's got his whole life in front of him, and I'm not even a glint in his eye. What do I say to him?
Why don't you introduce him to his granddaughter?
Hi.
Hi.
Just wanted to thank you folks for putting up this field, letting us play here. I'm John Kinsella.
I'm Ray.
So welcome to Atlanta Braves Chop Live. We've got Sean and Ray here, and we've got a great guest today. We're really excited to have Dwier Brown, who most famously played John Kinsella in 1989's Field of Dreams. And we're going to touch base with him, see what he's been up to. He's written a book. He's opening a baseball Hall of Dreams there in Dyersville, where the movie site is. So let's get into it. Welcome, Dwier. We're glad to have you.
Hey, good to be here, Ray and Sean.
Hey, we want to open up with a couple of questions. We know that movie. We know you from Field of Dreams, but you've been in a whole lot of movies. I pulled up a little bit about your bio, and I was like, wow, he's been in a whole lot of movies, and you're currently acting as well, correct?
Actually, I'm retired from acting.
Retired? Okay.
Yeah, I had a good run.
Great, great. And so what was it that brought you into the field of acting? Was it something growing up, or was it got you into that field? And what was your first role that you remember landing?
Let's see. Well, I grew up on a farm in Ohio, and one of the things that my oldest sister and my older brother and I could get out of farm work for was we'd get out for sports or for being in a play. So we did as much of that as we could to get out of farm work. Yeah, my sister started in it and I handed it to my brother, and then I kind of took over, and we would do church plays, and then I got in my senior class play. And anyway, it was kind of a way for me to express myself. You know, we were kind of farm kids, and be seen, not heard, and so anyway, it was kind of a way for me to let some emotion, some steam out. So that's how I kind of got started.
So then you combined those two things, sports and being in a play, and wound up in Field of Dreams there.
Yeah, that's what's pretty amazing for me to have grown up on a farm, dreaming of someday, maybe being an actor, being in a movie, and then, 8 years later, kind of getting to come back to a farm to be in this great movie with an incredible cast. And so it kind of came full circle for me with Field of Dreams.
Now, what was the first role that you remember getting actually to be in a play, a movie, or what have you?
Gosh, well, let's see. I went to college. Once I graduated, I moved to Chicago to try to get involved in improv. I worked for a summer at a theater called the Organic Theater Company, who happened to be the people who generated Bleacher Bums, which was sort of a story of the Bleacher Bums in the Chicago Cubs stadium, who, the hapless Cubs at the time, because they had, been such a long drought since they won a championship. But that was my first kind of theater gig. The first big television gig that anybody might remember me from was The Thornbirds, which was a big mini series with Richard Chamberlain, and that was the first job I got when I moved to Hollywood.
Okay. And so one of the things I remember about that movie, of course, I'm 47 years old, so I was kind of young when that came out, the Field of Dreams, but no, everybody, Kevin Costner is a well-known actor. And how did you land that role in Field of Dreams? And it's amazing because you look so natural playing baseball. So did you grow up a little bit playing baseball in relation to the movie, and how did you land that role in Field of Dreams?
Yeah, of course, I played Little League and everything when I was in high school. I did get cut from my freshman high school baseball team, but my little revenge is that it's my picture that's in the Baseball Hall of Fame.
There you go.
What position did you play?
I was a left fielder mostly. Yeah, I played in the outfield. I was the youngest kid in my high school class, so I was always like 2 years behind most kids in sports, which,
Mhm.
you know, kind of hurts you when you're in high school. Cause I was, you know, I played offensive line. I weighed 145 pounds and, so anyway, that's my excuse that I didn't do better in high school sports because I was younger than everyone. As far as the movie, it was just an audition that came down the pike like anyone else. Your agent calls you up and says, "Hey, there's this movie, Shoeless Joe," and I was like, I was very happy because I'd read the book Shoeless Joe in college, and it's a really good book, and you know, very different from how the movie turned out, but still, it's always exciting to get a chance to read for something that you're familiar with. So I auditioned probably against 300 other guys, and
Wow.
you know, I was lucky enough to get it. And you know, well, people made a big fuss over it for years. I was kind of embarrassed because it's just these 6 minutes, you know, and I thought, geez, anybody could have come in after James Earl and Kevin did this great job of setting it up and, you know, played the father. But you know, I'd been acting for a long time, and I was down to the last few against Tom Cruise for Risky Business, and
Oh, wow.
down to
Wow.
the last few guys against Brad Pitt for Thelma and Louise, and I didn't get those, in case you didn't know. You know, this is one I did get. So if I'm gonna beat myself up for the ones I didn't get, I at least have to take credit for the, you know, for this small role. And you know, if I'm remembered for anything in my acting career, and it's John Kinsella, then I you know, that's a pretty good one. I'll stick with that.
I mean, those 6 minutes you said, you know, those are probably maybe the most emotional part of that movie. And I think that, you know, I've thought about that as well. You know, having a catch with dad, that my dad's fortunately still here. And so, you know, that's something that I think that a lot of kids wish that they could, you know, boys and girls, obviously, you know, go out in the yard and throw with dad or throw with mom, you know, and so I think maybe that, from hearing stories from fans, was that one of the driving factors that kind of led you into your book, if you build it, to kind of capture that?
Yeah, it kind of was. What a lot of people don't know is I got cast in Field of Dreams, or well, Shoeless Joe at the time, and because it was back in Iowa, I thought, well, I'll go visit my parents on our farm in Ohio, and then, you know, dash on up to Iowa. So I had planned to do that, and, you know, was getting ready to do it. And my mom called and said, "Hey, you know, your dad's in the hospital. Can you come home?" And I said, "Well, gee, Mom, I'm coming home next week. Is that soon enough? What's wrong?" And she said, "Oh, don't worry about it then. That'll be plenty of time." And anyway, you know, it was the first I'd heard of it, of course. And anyway, I got off the phone and I kind of felt like, well, something doesn't feel right. So I changed my flight and I flew in that day. And that night, my dad died in the hospital.
Oh.
And
I'm sorry to hear that, Dwyer.
it's okay. You know, my dad is worth, you know, a few tears over for sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, so as a result, you know, we ended up, you know, having my dad's funeral, and I left my dad's funeral and went to Iowa to play a dead father coming back to play catch with their son, you know.
Mhm.
So, of course, it made that movie a lot more emotional for me. But, you know, so when people started coming up to me, you know, pretty shortly after the movie came out, you know, I mean, I'd had a career for 6 years, but it wasn't the kind of career where people would come up to me and say, you know, I mean, it'd be very occasional, but suddenly people come up and say, "Hey, man, did I go to high school with you?" And I'm like, "No, I went to high school in Ohio." And they're like, "Hey, you look like that guy from Field of Dreams." And I'd be like, "Oh, actually, I am that guy from Field of Dreams." And they'd be like, "Oh, no, you're not." And I'd say, "Yeah, I am. I was actually in that movie." And they're like, "No, you're not." And I said, you know, I found myself trying to convince them I was exactly who they thought I was. But nonetheless, once we get over that stuff, you know, they invariably start telling me about their dad, and, you know, they'd get a tear in their eye. And, you know, of course, that makes me think of my dad. And, you know, I'd find myself in an airport, or, you know, I was in a bait store the first time it happened. And, you know, I was camping and you know, found myself, you know, hugging this stranger, and, you know, both of us crying, and, you know, all the other, you know, fishermen kind of, you know, kind of pointing at us in the aisles. But, you know, to me, it was this great touchstone obviously for them, you know, over their dad, and for me over mine. You know, I love being reminded of my dad. I take this myth that he taught my brother and I to play catch with when I was.
Oh, wow.
I take it everywhere with me now, and let people try it on. The kids just think it's like, holy, this is supposed to be a myth, like.
Yeah.
But, it's kind of great because in a way it connects us all, with our dads, and I think of it as sort of having a catch, even though we're just talking. Maybe I'm telling about my dad, and they throw me back, the story about their dad, and then anyway, it's just kind of this great little I don't know, penance that has been set on my shoulders because of this role in the movie, and I'm happy to bear it and to be that person. Some people weren't lucky enough to make peace with their dad the way I got to, and if I can even just tell them that I think their dad would have been very proud of them. I think it means a lot to them coming from me, even though it's all because of this movie. It's just a movie, but it's obviously for fans, it's more than that.
Yeah, I know. What's funny is I get emotional watching movies. I connect to the characters, and my wife and kids kind of laugh at me like, "You're crying, it's just a movie." But when I hear the characters and see the characters, I connect to the characters. And there's a couple of scenes I want to talk to you about. Like for example, if you look behind me, you see a painting, and that painting is my father painted that in 1968. I actually have 4 of his paintings. I never met my father. Sadly,
those are paintings my dad did.
Oh,
wonderful.
wow.
There you go.
Well, I never met my father. He passed away when I was 14, but the family gave me his flag from his funeral. He was in the Navy. His ship is going to be stationed in Jacksonville as a museum, so I can visit that. But he gave me this painting. So when I hear that scene, like, Dad, do you want to play catch? I believe when I was a teenager, sometimes I'd look in the stands and I'd wonder if my dad was out there watching me during the game. So when you mentioned that, but there's 2 particular scenes. There's one scene when you meet, I guess, Kevin Costner and the family there, and he doesn't introduce you to his father as his father. Is kind of like a hesitancy, and it's kind of interesting. What was the director's perspective of why that he didn't mention that? It seemed like there was a hesitance, and also at that conclusion, right before you played catch, he says, "Dad, you want to have a catch? You want to have a catch?" And so those 2 scenes there.
Well, yeah, it's a good question. Kevin and I talked a lot about this along, with Phil Robinson, the director who had adapted the book to the movie. So we sort of like the idea that because there's sort of this magical sense about that field, earlier on, Amy Madigan invites Shoeless Joe up for coffee, and he looks down at the baseline sort of and says, "I don't think I can." And, of course, when Moonlight Graham goes to save Karen and walks across and transforms, you see his feet go from, Moonlight Graham's feet to Doc Graham's feet. There's some sort of mystical powers at work here. Mark, Tim Busfield's character, can't see the players, and everybody else, some people can. And anyway, the thought was that I think Kevin in that moment doesn't want to ruin this somehow by saying, "This is my, father," and poof, everything disappears or something. There's a very tentative feeling around, okay, we have created some magic that none of us understand. Mm-hmm. I don't want to blow this, Mm-hmm. And to me, it adds this element of tension in the scene.
Yeah.
Because, the audience isn't entirely in on it, as you mentioned, but he starts to say, this is John.
Yeah.
And, I kind of shoot him a look like, okay, this is how we're going to play this, or, and to me, it, again, just added this tension. Well, before the catch, in the script, there is no word "dad." He was just, "Hey, you want to have a catch?"
Oh, okay.
Keeping consistent with what I just was discussing. And, well, when the movie was finished, they had audience screenings, and the audience said, "We love the movie, but gosh, Ray sure is cruel not to tell his dad that, he's his son." And well, of course, nobody wanted people leaving upset from the movie for that reason. So Phil decided the way to solve that was to add the word "dad." I mean, it was looped in, which means just audio. The reason you
Oh,
don't
wow.
see Kevin's face when he says, "Hey, Dad," is because he never said Dad.
Oh,
So
wow.
you'll notice he says, "Hey," and it cuts to me, and he says the word Dad, because there's just no sense in having anybody upset or confused about that. I think Kevin enjoyed shooting the movie without, being very subtle about such things and trying to, through our performances, convey that. But, clearly for some of the people in the audience screenings, it wasn't enough.
Yeah.
So they added that, which is, fine with us too, because it certainly would be a shame if people, thought Ray was mean and not telling his dad. So anyway, that's sort of the explanation of those two moments. And to us, they were pivotal in playing the scene.
Now,
Speaking,
oh, go ahead, Sean.
speaking about the field, you just recently came back from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there.
Roman, one of your previous guests, we hung out a little bit too, but it's such a neat place. If any of your fans have not been up there and ever have an opportunity to, and it is out in the middle of nowhere, and I can assure you there is nothing to do there, but it is a pretty magical place. I think I encourage everybody to check it out. And I ended up going back there, maybe 24 times over the intervening 34 years since the movie. And I ended up just 2 years ago buying an old building there that was built in 1860 and had a hole in the roof for 5 years and was kind of, getting ready to fall over. And nobody was stepping up to buy it. And it was such a part of the community. It had been a dairy where people had gone and gotten ice cream after school. And they served this Tegler dairy, served milk in bags. So you would take the bags home and put them inside a glass pitcher, cut the corner off the bottom of the bag, and then pour the milk out of it. They served juice bags. This is before Capri Sun. They would give you a little plastic bag of juice, and everybody go there after practice or school, and you'd stick a little straw in it. And so people would tell me stories about this, and I thought, wow, this building can't be, demoed. It would be such a loss to the community. And so I stepped up and bought this building, and we've been working on it. It's taken a lot of work. It was in pretty bad shape. But we this month are going to open the Baseball Hall of Dreams. That's our T-shirt there. And it's sort of to celebrate the game of baseball and the players who maybe didn't have the stats to get into the Hall of Fame, but did great things. Disabled players, Mordecai Three-Finger Brown, who had a disability and learned how to turn it into an incredible sinker, and Jim Abbott, minority players in the Negro leagues, as well as Native American players and women, and who've made great contributions to the game, but haven't maybe gotten the recognition they deserve. So anyway, it's our little gift back to baseball and to this wonderful movie that's meant so much in my life. And so I encourage anybody who comes out, once you do everything you can at the field, walk in and out of the corn, have a catch, do all those things, run the bases, take the 3-mile drive into Dyersville and come check out our building. The building itself is a museum. It was built in 1860. I mean, when Abraham Lincoln was president, they were setting stones in this building.
Oh, wow.
And that to me is worth seeing on its own. But we have a lot of great exhibits. It's free, absolutely free. So come in. We're doing a lot of work for charity for the local Little League squads and anybody we can. So anyway, come, and we have a place where you can write your own dreams, roll them up and stick them in the little cracks in the wall. And we're going to keep track of them for you until you make them come true. And anyway, it's just it's just a great little experience. I hope everybody will take advantage of.
That's
wonderful. You should have a lot of people coming through, because the Field of Dreams side is actually doing when we talked to Roman, a lot of things are going on there, building fields, and a lot of groups are going to be coming in. So that's going to be wonderful to come visit that your location there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really, I was just at the field, and there was just, I could barely get out of there without, taking selfies with a couple dozen people, but it was, it's fun.
What's the kind of the selection process, for looking for people for the Hall of Dreams there? And, say like a Jim Abbott, if you have him there, are you doing a Hall of Fame style, induction for people who are obviously still living?
Well, that's kind of an issue that we're talking about. That, you know, whether we'll go that route to make it an actual hall with inductions. You know, and you know, Dale Murphy's one of the first guys.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
We'd love to. I mean, that guy deserves, you know, better. But you know, if we can. I mean, I met Dale at a signing, and what a great guy. You know, I'd love him to open up a Murph's in our building if he.
Yeah.
But
And-
anyway,
Yeah,
yeah, we're not sure exactly yet. You know, if we can kind of muster that kind of, you know, that takes kind of a organization, and you know, those things get, you know, extrapolate. But you know, we'd certainly like to do something like that, and really recognize some of these players while many of them are still alive. You know,
yeah.
and their chances of getting in the hall, you know, get slimmer. You know, there's so many deserving people, but you know, we certainly have Murph up there on our list.
Yeah, I'll tell you a connection with Dale Murphy and what you mentioned about the old building and the dairy. When we were kids down here in Georgia, South Georgia, there's a dairy called Connect Dairy, and I had a Dale Murphy milk jug that after I drained the milk out of it, I kept all my marbles in it for years and played marbles with Sean. And so, you know, Murph, his sponsor, you know, back in the day was Connect Dairy's milk jug. So that's definitely a connection there.
Yeah, that's neat. Yeah, we're looking for all those things right now. We just did everything we could to kind of get it open, but we have a lot of people who have expressed interest, baseball historians, and certainly there's an element to Iowa baseball that's you know, they have you know, in a half hour from Dyersville. In fact, where we all stayed when we shot the movie in Dubuque, you know, Charles Comiskey lived there his whole life, and he was such an influential part in the early part of baseball. Of course, you know, right. Comiskey Park named after him, but you know, worked in 4 different leagues. So the only guy in the country who's kind of served in 4 different baseball leagues in his career. Anyway, a lot of great history in the Iowa area, but yeah, we're open to, it's a huge, it's actually 5 buildings. So there's a lot of room for expansion. We're trying to get all, we've called it the baseball building. We're trying to get all baseball related building businesses in there. The If You Build It exhibit, which features the story of making of the movie Field of Dreams, is our first tenant. We have a 10-year lease with them. They're right next door to us, so you can come to both museums, you know, and not leave really the.
Oh, good.
And like I said, we've got batting cages that are getting ready to be set up, and we're hoping then to have a restaurant that, you know, the parents could come in, you know, have a beer while the kids are in the batting cages, you know, go through the museums. Anyway, geez, a lot of plans. Dreams are easy. Making it come true is where the work comes in.
One of the things I was wondering is, I mean, that scene is just so awesome. That's one of the most awesome parts of the movie, where the end part where y'all play catch, and Roman explained to us when all the vehicles drove up and that line of vehicles coming here to, you know, he explained that to us. But when we look at you in that movie, we see a ball, we see your uniform that you wore, see the glove. You mentioned about the Hall of Fame. Where are those? Do you know where those items are that were in the movie? Your uniform, the ball, and your glove.
Gosh, I don't. You know, obviously when my dad died, I took this mitt to be in the movie. You know, kind of as a tribute to him, because I played a catcher in the movie. The props department gave me a vintage catcher's mitt instead. I know that the outfits that we wore, mostly the White Sox outfits, had been worn by, you know, John Cusack and DB Sweeney and all those guys when they shot 8 Men Out the previous summer in Chicago, and those guys wanted to keep their uniforms. And Western Costume, who rented them, said, "Oh no, we got a movie coming in called Shoeless Joe." And so inside those uniforms was Cusack's name. You know, they usually put the actor's name inside, and sometimes they don't take them out. Anyway, those uniforms, I ran into a guy somewhere who said he'd bought all, I don't know, 8 or 13 of those uniforms in an auction. And I mean, I don't know if he was telling the truth or not, but somebody owns them. I hope. But yeah, I wish I had hung on to mine, but they wouldn't let us keep them either. So
Yeah.
I have my cap, my little Yankees cap that we had during the game, but that's the only memento.
How surreal was it for you to see last summer? And I don't know if you made it to the field when the Sox and the Yankees played, or if you watched it on TV, but how surreal is that to see, 30 plus years later that they're actually playing Major League Baseball there?
Oh yeah, it was mind-boggling. I'd been watching the field be constructed over the 2 years. It was postponed because of COVID, and I was kind of skeptical that they were going to be able to pull that off. MLB being who they are, kind of this bull in the china shop sometimes. But boy, I'll tell you, and I was there and I watched that game, and oh my gosh, the whole thing was just spectacular. They managed somehow to have that huge. I mean, it's not a major league size stadium, it's a minor league size stadium, but right next to that little ball field. And it does not feel, like they've impinged on the sacredness of that space. And the way they set it up, where you actually had to walk through rows of corn, there was no path made. You had to go right through, just like we did, 34 years ago, walk through 20 feet of corn to get where it opens up. They had the music playing, that beautiful score that James Horner wrote. They had cutouts of the players, full-size cutouts, Aaron Judge and all these guys hidden back into the corn. So you'd look down a row of corn and you'd see, these players. Oh my gosh, it was spectacular. I can tell you, I was getting chills, just like, I do when I watch the movie. And the field itself, they had that old-fashioned scoreboard. They had barn siding incorporated into it. The corn, the way that field sets down in there, and the corn rises on all sides so you can see it. And all of us were just like, oh, who's going to be the first person to jack one into the corn? Like, oh man, it was spectacular. And the fans, here we have Yankees fans, can be some of the most obnoxious in the country, and White Sox fans who are, proud of their heritage. And everybody was there supporting, like anybody hit a home run, 3/4 of the crowd at least were on their feet. Everybody was just rooting for the game of baseball. And it was such a great, just tribute to the game in the way that it should have been. And it was just a blast being there. I want to watch the television version because I've heard that it was great too, but boy, I can tell you it was magical being in the field.
Could you share with us, we have a few more moments left, if you could share with us about your book?
Oh yeah. So as I was saying before, when people started coming up to me, this first guy, in fact, in this bait store that I was telling you about, what he went on to tell me was, hey, I haven't spoken to my dad in 15 years. And I went to see that movie and it just broke me up. So I went home and I grabbed my dad by the arm and I said, don't say anything, just come with me. It's making me emotional. They watched that movie together and they just decided to get over whatever it was, that maybe they'd even forgotten at that point. You know how those arguments go. You don't even remember what started it, but by God, you're going to stick to your guns. And that's happened to me more than once. People who've lost their relationships with their dads for a variety of reasons, maybe even good reasons, but you realize that it doesn't go on forever. Not everybody gets to make up with their dad, and if you don't, you're saddled with that. I mean, I personally believe that you can heal your relationship with your dad, even if they're gone. That's all in your heart. Your part of it is all in your heart, and that's the only part that matters. But nonetheless, it's a lot easier when they're in person and you can both, reconcile together. And people who've changed careers. Anyway, I heard so many of these stories, and I'd take notes at the time, and I thought, I figured this must be happening to Kevin and Tim Busfield and James Earl, wherever they are. And then after a while, I realized, wow, you meet James Earl, you're going to talk to him about Star Wars,
right,
or, a million other movies. Kevin, there's how many wonderful movies has that guy been in that you'd want to talk to him about? With me, as much as I've been in other movies, this is what if anybody recognizes me, this is mostly what it's from. And so I get told these stories, and, in that way, I'm this priest who's heard these confessions. And so I started writing those stories down, because I thought, other people should know that they're not the only ones out there who this movie has had a profound effect upon. And of course, that made me think of my dad. And I hadn't, as much as I'd healed a lot with my dad, I hadn't put all together, the unbelievable idea that my dad died 30 days before that movie. happened, and that I would be, tasked with this job of being, John Kinsella to the world, and in a great way, touching with my dad. So, I ended up writing that story. And of course, the shooting the movie was incredible. We had so much fun. We'd go out to bars afterwards and, shut the places down. Most of the people who were on that shoot were either from New York or Chicago or LA. They were bored silly. I'd grown up on a farm. I knew there was nothing to do and I enjoyed that, but these guys were stir crazy. We started a bowling team. We had Shoeless Joe bowling shirts that we all took fake names. My name was Lou, and everybody else came up with stupid names. They had them embroidered on shirts. I mean, we just had a load of fun, and of course there was a lot of difficulty shooting that movie, and not the least of which was that it was a drought and the corn wouldn't grow. We got there, the corn was knee high. Can you imagine these players walking on a knee-high corn? We would look like idiots, So they got an insurance policy out on the corn with Lloyd's of London, and they started watering the corn. They ordered 30,000 fake corn stalks that they were going to shove in the ground that we were supposedly going to walk out of, and all this stuff was going on. You would never know it, seeing how beautifully that movie came.
Well, Dwier, we really appreciate your time. You played a wonderful role, had a profound impact on fans everywhere, and we're really excited for your Hall of Dreams and everything.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you guys. And yeah, a book available on Amazon, and I have a website, dwierbrown.com. But thank you guys so much. And, I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Dwier, want to have a catch?